Hi, this is Dr. John Odette. Today I'll be presenting a case of a mature white brunescent cataract where we use Trypan Blue, and Trypan Blue goes around the zonules and gets into the vitreous. In this case, you can see I've got a pretty dense cataract. My choice of usage of Vision Blue is to just inject a little bit into the anterior chamber. I don't try and pressurize the eye with Vision Blue, just enough to kind of coat the anterior capsule. I usually give it about 10 or 15 seconds and then rinse it out with some VSS. Normally I do this with a cannula. I had a new scrub tech on this case, which I think is what kind of contributed to this occurring. But in this case, I just decided to reflex it out with a chain cannula. Normally I use a regular 27 gauge cannula. I then inject my viscoelastic. In this case, I chose Helon Endocoat because it is a pretty dense cataract and I wanted to protect the endothelium. Because it's a mature cataract and the pupil was not too large, I decided to put in iris retractors. At this point you can see my Vision Blue has stained some of the capsule, but there's areas that I wanted to add some Vision Blue. Once again, my scrub technician had given me a cannula that had viscoelastic in it, and you can see I'm having some difficulty injecting the Vision Blue. All I'm trying to do here is dust the anterior capsule with the Vision Blue. Unfortunately, there was a couple times where it kind of shot out. And I think this contributed to the problem during the case. But you do see I kind of dust the anterior capsule in these locations, and once again rinse out the Vision Blue with some VSS. At this point, although the Vision Blue injected kind of forcefully, I wasn't too worried. However, as I'm putting in some VSS, you can see some Vision Blue refluxing from under the iris, especially here where I've slowed down the video at 3 o'clock. Happened right before this at about 12 o'clock. You may have missed that. But it's definitely occurring here at 3 o'clock in the video. Since I've noted it refluxing out at approximately 3 o'clock, I've said, oh, this probably, something probably a little abnormal. You can see even more of it refluxes out as I removed my cannula and decompressed the anterior chamber a little bit. As I've stopped the video, I've made it quite painfully obvious that there's some Vision Blue where it shouldn't be. Now at this point I'm not totally sure, is it just under the iris? You can actually probably see some under the iris at 12 o'clock as well, but I don't really know if this has entered the vitreous cavity at this point. So I'm still questioning exactly where this is, whether it's going to affect my case going forward, but I know something's not quite right. So I go back in, inject a little more of my viscoelastic. I use a little bit of a double bubble technique, so this is New Visc, which is made by BVI. My preferred technique with these white cataracts is to just make a small puncture wound with my cystotome. I then go in with a 27 gauge cannula and aspirate out some cortical material. This is to help decompress the lens and capsule a little bit to try and avoid an Argentinian flag sign. I apologize to all of our Argentinian colleagues out there who this was unfortunately named after. In this case, I decompressed 3 or 4 times. I edited the video down to just show it once, and then I go back in with my cystotome and start my capsulorhexis. Usually I like to start my rhexis with the cystotome. I get about a fifth to a fourth of it completed, as you can see here, and then I go in with my Utrata forceps and complete the capsulorhexis. I do like to make these slightly smaller than an average capsulorhexis in case I need to do any placement of a sulcus lens and optic capture. In this case, I did not need to do that. I've also debated making these larger and have done that in the past as well in cases where I think I will need to do an extra cap procedure. In my next step is I like to hydrodissect with a chain cannula. I go 180 degrees across the primary wound and inject. Here I will slow down the video again. I use the chain cannula to help rotate the lens a little bit, but what you'll see is more vision blue refluxing from about 9 o'clock in the video. It's a smaller amount, but now I'm pretty confident I have vision blue refluxing at 3 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and 9 o'clock in the video. Not exactly what I want to see. You can see the lens rotate quite nicely. I like using the chain cannula in this fashion. In these cases, you really want to make sure you've got nice rotation of the lens, in my opinion, before you go start phacoing or phaco chopping is my technique. Other people like to just chop the lens. I'm okay doing whatever, but my preferred technique happens to be phaco chop. Here what I'm showing is you can now see as I'm removing the lens, my red reflex is more of a blue reflex. It's worst from about 6 o'clock to 12 o'clock in the video. However, it's somewhat present throughout. So at this point I have a bluish orange red reflex. It makes the posterior capsule very difficult to see. It also makes the anterior capsule difficult to visualize, which I wasn't aware of. Here there is some cortical material remaining, however it's very difficult to visualize. I try and push some of this vision blue away with some viscoelastic in the bag. You can see I get a little better red reflex at this point, but still not perfect. I just tapped the eye to show how hard it was. But I did want to go in and try and remove some of this cortical material. I don't like leaving cortex behind for a whole host of reasons. This was rather adherent cortical material. It made it more difficult to not only to mention the fact that I couldn't visualize it real well. This is a silicone tip IA that's made by Alcon. It's very capsule friendly. I do like to use this, but I'm being rather ginger for me because I did not want to damage this capsule that I couldn't well visualize. See, one of the iris retractors came out at this point. I chose not to replace it and decided, okay, it's time to just place my lens. In this case, I'm using a 3-piece B&L Li61AO lens. I like this lens. It's a very clear lens and does well if and when I need to put it in the sulcus. In this case, the capsule remained intact, injected nicely into the bag. And now that I have the lens in protecting the posterior capsule, I did decide to go back in and try and remove a little bit of the additional cortex. But it was so difficult to visualize that I really didn't get as much of it out as I wanted. It wasn't a huge problem as the patient was about 20/25 vision post-op day 1. Very good result. The cortex is out in the periphery that's remaining, so it didn't create a problem. I did go in and remove the iris retractors and inflate the bag, or I'm sorry, inflate the anterior chamber. The wound sealed nicely. Interestingly, the vision blue was not present in the vitreous on post-op surgery day 1. It was nice to see the patient's vision was very clear. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this case.